Good afternoon. I am so excited to be here. When I look around the room, I see just tons of potential. Just by the fact that you're here today, regardless of where you came from or how you got here, means that you have the potential to achieve great things in the future. Here's the thing though, it doesn't matter what I see. It only matters what you see. So I ask, when you think about the future, what do you see? Do you see humanity split along racial, ethnic, and cultural divides? Or do you see a global community working together? Do you see a world permanently damaged by wars, industrialization, and climate change? Or one where humans live symbiotically with their environments so that all species and all ecosystems can thrive? When thinking about the current status of things, it's hard not to worry. There are a lot of problems out there. Here's the thing though, worrying doesn't accomplish anything. I propose instead that you choose to look at each problem as an opportunity to learn, to grow, and improve the status quo for yourself, your family, and your community. Take, for instance, the invention of the telephone. Back in the late 1800s, the telegraph was the primary means of communication. Most people were happy with this. They were fine with the status quo. They thought it was great. It was much faster than the mail. However, it had a few problems. You could only transmit one letter at a time, and you had to be specially trained how to use it, so it wasn't readily available to just anyone. Alexander Graham Bell, an immigrant and a professor at Boston University, saw this problem as an opportunity. He set about figuring out not only how to transmit speech, but how to make the technology widely available. Today, more than half the world's population has access to a phone. You're probably thinking, yeah, but I don't know if I can do that. I don't really have big ideas or visions. And you know what? Most of the time, I think the same thing. I don't see myself as a visionary or an idea person. I see myself as an action taker. Luckily, none of us are here alone. And I found that you get the best results if you work as part of a team, with each team member filling a role that plays to their strengths. So with that in mind, let's look at 3 key things that help transform problems into opportunities: vision, leadership, and resources. Vision is the ability to see a problem as an investment-worthy opportunity. Albert Einstein said, "You cannot solve a problem with the same level of thinking that created it. You have to approach it from a different angle." Visionaries sometimes gain this perspective by chance. They just happen to be in the right place at the right time with the right background experience or knowledge in order to make things happen. Other times, though, visionaries go in search of opportunities. They know there's a problem. They may not know what the solution is initially, but they think they can try and solve it, and they believe that they have a responsibility to do so. Regardless of whether a visionary happens on an opportunity or they go in search of one, there's 2 key traits that all visionaries share. The first is a deep-seated belief about why the problem they're taking on is worth solving. And the second is an openness to change. All right, so we see an opportunity, we believe it's worth investing in, and we're willing to give it a try. What's next? As a Marine, this is my favorite topic. Leadership, the ability to inspire people to act in support of a common goal. If you're going to take on this problem, you need to be able to convey your belief about the new opportunity in such a way that inspires people to do something about it. And there's 2 ways to do that. You can either tell them or you can show them. If you need to tell them, I recommend watching Simon Sinek's TED Talk titled "Start with Why." He does a great job, much better than I can, explaining or breaking down how to communicate with people in a way that wants them to take action. If you can, though, I recommend showing people. Showing is a much more powerful means of communicating. It allows your audience to personally experience the change, to see it happen, and perhaps most importantly, to see that you personally are invested in making it happen. A few other thoughts on leadership. Leaders come in all shapes, sizes, colors, and even ages. Leaders are not defined by what they do, which is inspire action, but by how they do it. There's many different styles of leadership, so you need to pick one that works for you. And depending on the situation, you may need to transition from the role of leader to follower and back to leader so that everybody on your team has the opportunity to tackle the problems with their particular strengths. Now, you may be thinking that this sounds complicated, and you're right. There's both an art and a science to leadership. The science part we can deconstruct, study, even teach, like explain the difference between telling and showing. The art part, though, is a lot harder. You can't really teach it, such as trying to figure out what's going to inspire one particular person to take action. The good news is you can get better with practice, and you can learn through practicing. All these problems that we've identified now as opportunities, they're not just opportunities to improve the status quo. They're opportunities to improve yourself. Opportunities to practice your leadership skills, to gain valuable experience, and to interact with people that maybe you wouldn't interact with otherwise. Which brings me to the last thing we need: resources. You're going to need some combination of talent, time, funding, and materials. The most important of these is going to be talented people. In his book, Good to Great, Jim Collins introduces this idea of first who and then what with a bus analogy that I really love. He says, pretend your vision is a bus. It's sitting there, it's parked, and you need to get it moving. The best way to do that is to get the right people on the bus. If you have the right people on the bus, and they're bought in on why it needs to get moving, they'll help you get all the other resources you need, and they'll make sure that the bus goes someplace great. So how do you find the right people? Networking. I know you're thinking, oh no, another buzzword. I keep hearing these. I don't really get it. It's hard. It's complicated. Well, the good news is it's not quite as hard as leadership. So stay with me here. Networking is just meeting new people, appreciating their talents and endeavors, and figuring out ways to work together when you can. Like leadership, there's both some art and some science to networking. There's the art of having good communication or good conversations, building relationships, which you can get better at with practice. The science, though, it's super easy. It's just basic math. Because the more people you know, and the more people they know and can connect you with, the easier it is to find the right people to help you drive your bus. Okay, so we've talked about turning problems into opportunities and the three things you need to do that: vision, leadership, and resources. I think you're ready to give this a try, but I want to make it clear that not all problems are giant problems or intimidating. Some problems, in fact, most problems are small, and they may not affect a lot of people, but they have a big impact on those that they do affect. So don't necessarily feel like you have to start big. You can start small. And if you need some encouragement, I'd like to share with you a very small example of a problem that I think, and I hope, I helped turn into an opportunity. Part of my story is going to be a bit gruesome, but I think it's important for you to understand the original conditions so that you can appreciate the change that occurred. Before being assigned to the Naval Postgraduate School in Monterey, California, I spent a year working at the US Embassy in Islamabad, Pakistan. Now, Pakistan's a relatively young country, and it has a lot of potential, but it does have some weaknesses. It's not a very wealthy country, and the people there, on average, only earn around $1,500 US per person per year. Compare that to the United States, where our average annual per capita income is around $63,000 per person. So what does this mean? Well, it means that a lot of things that we here take for granted in the United States just aren't available there. Things like regular garbage collection services and animal shelters. Unfortunately, the citizens of Pakistan nor their government can afford to support those. So the US Embassy where I worked is located in a section of Islamabad known as the Diplomatic Enclave. Most of the foreign embassies are located there, and many of the embassy employees live and work in and around the enclave. In today's consumer-driven economies, when you have a lot of people living and working in close quarters, guess what they're going to generate? They're going to generate trash. And if you leave that trash sitting around, it's going to attract wildlife and stray animals, and in particular, stray dogs. When I arrived, there were 25 to 30 stray dogs that lived in and around the enclave. By and large, these guys were harmless. They're hungry strays just looking for a warm place to sleep and their next meal. When they're healthy, they even help keep away more dangerous wildlife, like wild pigs, which have been known to attack humans, and rats, which can carry diseases. I actually took this picture on a run that I was taking one day, and that dude in the back was pretty scary, let me tell you. The local population there, unfortunately, didn't see the dogs as a benefit to their environment. And so periodically, the local police would go around and they would shoot all the dogs in the enclave and then dispose of them. If this sounds bad, you're right. Maybe you're a dog lover like me and you hate hearing about animals being killed unnecessarily. But it's also bad because it didn't solve the problem. Every time they'd come in and shoot a bunch of dogs and haul them off, another batch would just move in. So in 2017, a wonderful lady named Mariki saw this problem as an opportunity. She set out just on her own, feeding the dogs and trying to encourage as many of her friends as possible to adopt or foster them. She even started raising funds so that they could get vaccinated and neutered and then re-released back into their local territory. Her idea was that if you created a catch, neuter, vaccinate, and release program, that you'd end up with a healthy, stable, people-friendly population of dogs that could be permanent residents of the area and help fend off some of the more egregious wildlife. About the time I arrived, Mariki's initiative was really gaining traction. She'd gotten a bunch of the local diplomats on board, some Pakistani veterinarians had started to help out, and they launched the program called Islamabad Paws, which fundraises, set up fostering and adoptions, and organizes volunteers to go around and feed the dogs. One day, Mariki mentioned in her way that they were having a hard time finding safe places for the few remaining dogs that were pregnant to stay until after they'd had their litters, because they couldn't be vaccinated or spayed until that had happened. She also said that they were having a really hard time getting the residents and the local police to not be afraid of the dogs and to allow them to stay. She really wished they had some dog houses so the dogs could be seen as official residents of the enclave. So I went home and I thought about this for a few days, and I decided this was something I could help with. I started drawing doghouse designs, and I reached out to my network. I'd become really good friends with a lot of the NATO military guys that were also working in the area, and so I started with them. In particular, I asked a former US Marine who was there working construction at the US Embassy if there was anything they thought they could do to help. There was a big construction project going on, and there was a lot of supplies around. I was like, you know what? They probably don't need all that stuff. Sure enough, the construction company donated a huge stack of plywood, and they loaned us a bunch of power tools. The Australians donated old crates and boards, and they let us use their barbecue and recreation area as a construction zone. The Brits brought extra extra hand tools and donated a bunch of nails, and then some of my fellow US service members donated most of their weekend to come help assemble and then deliver the dog houses around the enclave. On the day of the big assembly, not only did everybody show up as promised, but they brought friends and cold drinks and spare tools and snacks. And at the end of the day, we ended up with 6 dog houses instead of the 4 I'd originally planned on. That's me in the bottom left corner with Chili, one of the dogs that was adopted by one of my Australian friends. We borrowed her to make sure that they were the right size. She wasn't exactly happy about it at the time, but she survived, so, you know. We tested it beforehand. Another friend of mine, you can see him in the top right-hand corner. He wanted to make sure that it was okay before they stuck her in there. So, and I'm happy to report now that almost 2 years later, most of the dog houses are still there. Volunteers are still feeding the dogs, and Islamabad Paws is still treating and trying to find homes for as many of the new dogs that show up as possible. If you're curious, you can even look them up on Facebook. Pakistan Stray Animals, they have a website. They've got pictures of what they've been up to. So I contributed to this endeavor, but I hope you realize that this wasn't my project and it wasn't my vision. It was Mariki's vision and her leadership, with a little bit of my networking, and a whole lot of generosity, time, talent, and materials that were given by all the other people that helped gather the resources, build the dog houses, and are still there today treating and vaccinating the stray dogs. I'd like to end by saying that there's potential in everyone. Potential to see the world in a meaningful and constructive way that enables action. Potential to lead by sharing inspiration and by setting the example. And potential to give your time, your knowledge, and maybe even your resources to a greater vision for the future. Visionaries and leaders come in all shapes and sizes. You have the opportunity right now to fill one of those roles. Take it. If you're unsure, start small. Ask your friends for help, and maybe ask them what it is they see when they think about the future. Thank you.